These are my new BBS E87s for the E36, and these things have been a long time coming. I wasn't expecting to get these wheels until summer of next year. That's how long the wait is, but BBS maybe pulled some strings, got them here now, so we're going to put them together with brand new halves, get them mounted on the car, and while we're at it, we're going to dry ice clean the engine bay and knock out a few other things, and get the E36 back on the street again, and I'm stoked for it. Let's go. So as many of you know, the E36 has been tucked away in the back of the shop ever since the last time we had it on the channel. To be honest, that's kind of this car's MO, but I'm hopeful that today's changes will have me wanting to spend more time behind the wheel. I'm certain that installing the rest of the interior will make it more enjoyable to spend time inside of, and of course new wheels will have me excited to park it somewhere only to turn around and look at it. But before we do either of those things, I figured why not spend a bit of time cleaning under the hood. It's important to remember that I started this engine swap all the way back when I was in high school, at just 17 or 18 years old. And 18-year-old me didn't spend nearly enough time cleaning the engine up before it went into the engine bay, nor did I really clean up the engine bay that surrounds it. Add on to that the fact that I've now had this car for 18 years and have never really done a thorough engine bay cleanup, and you have an engine bay that at first glance probably looks decent, but is admittedly rough around the edges. Dust, dirt, grime, and even aluminum oxidation have this engine bay looking old and tired, and I want it to match the rest of the car. As always, the theme here is perfection. But in order to clean this tired old engine bay, we're going to need more than just some degreaser and rags, and that's where my friend Will Dries and his company Staged Result come into play. Will called me up and let me know that he's got some extra dry ice that he needs to use, and so he brought over his dry ice blasting system, along with everything we're going to need to prep this car and get it cleaner than it's ever been. While the dry ice blasting process is unlikely to harm the paint finish, we took extra precaution to make sure we are safe and sound. And from there, it was time to get down to business. After a quick rundown, Will handed off the ice blaster to me, and I got to work. Undoubtedly, there are some of you out there that are unfamiliar with the process of dry ice blasting. And the way that it works is it uses extremely high pressure air to send particles of dry ice out of the muzzle at high velocity. Dry ice, to be clear, is simply frozen solid carbon dioxide, and that means it doesn't melt. Instead, it sublimates, and that's what you're seeing on screen. Both the velocity and the sublimation process lift contaminants off of the surface of whatever you're cleaning. Dry ice also exits the gun at lower than 100 degrees below 0 Fahrenheit, and this freezing process further helps remove contaminants from any surface in the engine bay. The end result is almost unparalleled in any other fashion. There is no better way to clean parts. And it can be used on literally any surface, from your wiring to your hoses to any plastic trimmings. This is the way to clean up an engine bay, and I am eternally grateful that Staged Result was willing to come through and help with this. The end result of my engine bay is a complete and total transformation, and I think it finally looks the way that it should. So what we have here is a genuine, brand new BMW Slick Top Coupe M3 headliner. It's surprising that it's still available, but you can get them. And the reason I have gone with this is, well, some of you may know, we converted this car to a slick top. Sunroof got cut out, and then Axis Paintworks, who painted the car, also did a complete reskin of the roof and did an incredible job. I'll show you guys the metalworking inside. It is unreal. It's incredible. Unfortunately, I have to cover that beautiful metalwork up, but I want it to look good inside, and this is kind of the last major piece to the puzzle. I'm gonna be honest, I have no idea how this thing even goes back in the car. I pulled the old one out 5 years ago in a hurry to pull the whole sunroof cassette and everything. You guys are along for the ride on this one. This is gonna be a mess. And of course, in order to get the headliner in, the seats have to come out. So as you guys can see, this is obviously where the sunroof used to be. And if you look really closely, there's a faint line all the way around. And so that is the TIG weld for the, I guess we'll call it delete plate. It wasn't like a piece that somebody sells. He actually had a hot rodder that does sheet metal work come in and shape a new kind of whole piece of this roof skin to match the contour. And the work is insane. If you actually look close enough at it, we'll see if we can show it on camera, you can see the hammered TIG weld. It's not body worked. It's unreal metal work, some of the best stuff I've seen. So another huge shout out to Axis Paintworks for the incredible work he did on this car. I feel bad covering it up, but let's be real, nobody actually wants to see this part. So we're gonna see if we can get the headliner in. If I remember right, it's all the kind of silly bits and pieces like the oh shit handles and the visors and stuff that hold it all up. So I'm gonna try to get it in here and then go through all the parts and pieces that I have and figure out how to stick it up there. So the most important piece, of course, is that brand new M3 headliner. And for the non-BMW savvy, as is tradition, only M cars get black headliners and pillars. Non-M cars are typically fitted with tan or gray, as my car was from the factory. Because we got rid of the sunroof, we have to change the headliner. The original one has a huge square hole in it. And given that we're going to change everything, I want to change it to black. But it does require changing more than just the headliner itself, because all of the accessories that mount to it, from the grab handles to the map light to the sun visors, are all black too. Thankfully, not too long ago, my buddy Kyle decided to turn his M3 into a race car and kept all of the parts and pieces on the shelf, which means I got to adopt them and give them a new home. It's all of those black trim pieces that hold the headliner up into position, and then the window gaskets themselves somewhat border it. They have a small rubber lip that needs to be pressed to the outside of the headliner so that everything is firmly tucked into place. I'll be honest, I was told by more than one person that installing an E36 headliner is a huge headache. But honestly, this wasn't bad at all. Although I have to imagine that having a sunroof in place would make it significantly worse. But that's not our problem anymore, so let's call this done. So the headliner's in, and it looks really good, as you would expect. It went in a lot easier than I expected it to. I've heard this is nothing but a nightmare, although it could be that the pillar covers are the nightmare. The headliner was really straightforward. So I went and I dug up my pillar covers, and here begins the long story, because initially, I had a complete headliner redone in suede to match the seats, to match this. Turns out I accidentally bought a 318 Ti slick top headliner, even though it was advertised as a coupe headliner. It was incorrect, it doesn't fit in this car, so had to scrap that, and that's why I wound up with a brand new slick top headliner. And now I think I want my pillar covers to match the headliner as opposed to kind of mixed and matched with suede versus just the black fabric. But the problem is even if I wanted to put these in right now, it turns out that all of my tabs on the backside are snapped off, so I can't install them. Even if I could, it looks like maybe during the wrap process they got damaged because kind of all the corners are snapped off and they've been glued back on. I'm not entirely sure, but either way, I can't in good conscience put these in the car, and that bums me out. In the last episode, I really talked about how this car fights me every time I touch it, and this is no different. I just wanted to have a headliner in the car with some pillar covers. This seemed like something we'd knock out easily for an episode, and now I have a halfway finished project that who knows when we'll get back to, because if I'm gonna buy new pillar covers, I think those are like $1,200 for the set, and that's not something I can justify anytime soon. So I guess we're scrapping this project for the time being. It bums me out big time, but I guess there's a reality moment for you. It's not always smooth sailing on the channel. So I'm gonna put these back in a box. We'll scrap this project halfway through and I guess pivot and do some wheels. So, when it comes to wheels, we have one of my all-time favorites. These are BBS E87 centers. They've been fully polished by our friends at Motorsport Powder Coating, and they're more or less ready to go. All that's left is we need to figure out what size rim halves we're going to pair them with. And for that, we've got to make sure they clear our brakes. So on the E36, we have our Brembo big brake kit that we put on a number of episodes ago. But to clear the HRE centers from these calipers, we're currently running a 10mm H&R spacer. Ideally, I don't want to run a spacer with the new wheels, and instead we can have a little bit more lip on the car, but I want to confirm, so we're going to test fit a center and make sure that it clears the brake with no issues. Immediately, it's clear that this is a success. The wheel centers have enough of a back pad and spoke clearance to clear our caliper with room to spare. On the HREs, it wasn't the spokes that caused the issue, it was the diameter of the center back pad, but in this case, both clear and we should be good to go. From there, of course, we need to measure for our rim halves, and if you missed the previous episode where I explained how we do this, you should check it out. I'll put a link in the description. But our measurements tell us that we should be able to run a 2-inch lip. It'll be an aggressive fitment, but it should work just fine, and it'll bring our overall width to 9.5 inches wide with a positive offset of around 22 millimeters. That means these will eventually sit about 4 millimeters more aggressive than our HREs. Now, I know some of you guys are wondering why I would put a set of wheels on the car that I could just go buy off the shelf instead of these vintage HREs that are one of a kind and unobtainable. And that's a fair question. I can't really justify it, but I want to change it up. That's how it's always been, and that's how it's going to be. These aren't permanent either. I've wanted to do a set of full polished wheels in this car for a long time. I always thought it'd be a set of LMs, but instead we've got E87s, and I'm stoked for them. They've got so many cool little details, like the scalloping around the bolt holes to make them lighter, as well as the pocketing on the back and the pocketing between the spokes of the wheel. These things are sick. I've been waiting for something like this for a long time. It doesn't really matter that they're lightweight because it's just a show car, but they're going to be awesome. And these will look great until we swap these ones out. Now, one really cool thing about BBS Motorsport wheels is they use what are called sealing rings. Instead of having like a silicone gasket smeared around the wheel to seal the air in, it's an aluminum kind of ring, if you will, with a rubber gasket more or less adhered to the outside. You got to be kind of careful with it, it will come off. But in short, we just bolt the wheel together, this seals it up, and we don't have to worry about any leaks. They're serviceable, replaceable. We don't have to wait for it to dry out, anything like that. We can bolt these together and get tires mounted on right away. So nice and simple. Given that these wheels are face mount wheels, we're pairing our 2-inch lips with 7.5-inch barrels. And if you're not familiar with what face mount means, there are a handful of ways to mount wheels together, and it's dependent on how the center is designed. In our case, the center will sit over the top of the rim halves, in the front, just like this, versus others that are oftentimes built sandwiched between the two rim halves or sometimes mounted behind them, what's known as reverse mount. Along with our new rim halves and our sealing rings, I got all new hardware from BBS as well, making these wheels brand new from bottom to top. The assembly process for these is thankfully very straightforward. Motorsport centers typically have integrated threads instead of nuts that go on one side, meaning we only have to thread in the bolts themselves and then torque them to spec. In this case, that's 155 inch-pounds. With all 4 wheels assembled, and of course with the valve stems installed, there's one final step we need to accomplish before we mount the tires. And that, of course, means we call up our friend Gustavo from DBG Detailing and have him break out the ceramic coating to protect these wheels for years to come. In typical Gustavo fashion, he went above and beyond, ceramic coating not only the front of the wheel, but the entire backside as well to make sure that it will stay perfectly clean no matter what. With all 4 wheels coated, it's finally time to turn our attention to the last important piece of this puzzle, and that, of course, is tires. If you're familiar with the channel, you of course know who we're going to turn to, but if not, the answer's simple. we've called up our friends at Falcon Tire for a beautiful set of brand new RT660s. I'm going with 235/40/17s again, just like on the HREs, given that they are the same width. However, the RT660 does run quite a bit wider than the NTO ones we had before. Combined with the lower offset wheels we're going to be running, it might make fitment a little bit challenging, but I feel good about our math, and I know that it's going to look incredible. As always, we called up Eric from Rocco's Wheel and Tire to mount these Falcons and get everything balanced. Finally comes the moment of truth. We get to see how these things actually fit up on the E36. And as mentioned at the beginning of the video, this has been a long time coming, but it could have been a lot worse. The waiting list for E87s is all the way out to mid-2025. I was told it'd be 18 months minimum before we got our wheels, considering I ordered them in January. But it sounds like the wheel gods were smiling upon us because we got these far more than a year early. Or maybe it's just our friends at BBS doing us a solid. One of the two. That is everything I've wanted for so long. I want to drive this thing out there. We got to align it real quick, and then let's get some shots. Now, before we actually drive the car, I want to scan it because it's been acting a little bit weird lately. And that brings us to today's sponsor, which is Carly. And Carly makes this awesome OBD2 scanner that works with literally any OBD2 car. And it gives you all sorts of information from diagnostics to live data, and it will even tell you how to repair it in certain scenarios. So let's plug this thing in and see how it works. After plugging in the Carly scanner to my OBD2 port and allowing it to pair to the app, this thing boots up and immediately recognizes one important factor. Carly thinks my car is an E36, which sounds crazy, but it's correct because it even works with my S54 swap. Immediately, we've got access to all sorts of amazing features like a used car mileage check or battery health report, but in this case, I want to know what kind of codes my car is throwing, and this thing is in depth. As you can see, we've got some complicated codes from my cluster swap. What's also cool is that the paid version of the Carly app also gives you access to the Smart Mechanic feature, which offers expert-written guides that tell you how to identify, diagnose, and repair the issue that your car is reporting. And the Carly app will also give you all sorts of live data while your car is running, from engine speed to coolant temp, oil pressure, or anything else your ECU will spit out. So yeah, there are a few issues that this car is reporting, but thankfully I think most of them are just some weird swap gremlins from this being an old, complicated engine swap, and most of my issue centers around that bad battery report. But thank you to Carly for sponsoring this episode, and if you guys want one of these for your toolbox, you can get one at the link in my description, and you can use this checkout code to get 15% off of your Carly scanner. Now though, it's finally time. I am beyond eager to see this thing outside of the shop from more than just a few feet away. But the question is, will this be the change I was looking for? I can confidently say I have never had a wheel and tire package that fits this car better. The ride height is dialed in, the wheels and tires fill the wheel wells perfectly, and as a whole, I think the look is flawless. The full polish aesthetic might not be for everybody, but I think it complements the granite silver paint perfectly, and this is the look I have been wanting for a long time. The E36 isn't finished yet, but this makes us one major step closer to that goal. The list gets shorter and shorter, and someday, I'm confident we're going to get there. So if you want to see it, subscribe, and we'll be back with another E36 episode soon.